Welcome back to Life's Chillin'. My name is Avital, and this week's Parsha is Parshat Re'eh. And Parshat Re'eh is a continuation of this monologue that Moses is having with the Jewish people. His final words, his final encouragement and wisdom that he's sharing with them. And in Parshat Re'eh, Moses sort of reviews the laws of kashrut. And he goes through and talks about the animals that are kosher and the animals that are not kosher. But the way that whole conversation begins is with this verse. In all your soul's desire, you may slaughter and eat meat, according to the blessing that Hashem your God will have given you. So it starts off by saying, A, you're allowed to eat meat, which was not always the case for the Jewish people. It's kind of believed that before the flood with the story of Noah, that the Jewish people were not allowed to eat meat. But first, we're getting confirmation that you are allowed to eat meat. And that here it's saying you're allowed to eat it to your soul's desire. It sounds like you're allowed to just eat this plethora of meat and as much as your heart desires and have to your heart's content, basically. You can eat as much as you want. And it's an interesting starting verse because then what follows is all of the actually you can't eat this and you can't eat this and here are the exceptions. So I'll read you a few of those. It says, be strong not to eat the blood, for the blood is the life, and you shall not eat the life with the meat. So first of all, we're not allowed to eat the blood of animals. And commentators suggest that when it's talking about not eating the life with the meat, it's saying that you should not eat a limb off of an animal that is still alive. So blood and living animals, those are off limits. And then the Torah says these are the animals that you may eat, and it lists a number of animals. And then it says these are those which you shall not eat, and it goes through and it lists those animals. And lastly, it says the pretty famous verse that you shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. So I thought that's interesting, because didn't it just say eat meat to your heart's desire? Didn't the Torah just give us permission to eat meat? And then now all of a sudden and you can't eat the blood, and you can't eat living animals, and here are all the other animals that you can't eat, and you can't cook a kid in its mother's milk, so no meat and milk together. Where did all these prohibitions come from immediately following the freedom that we have to eat meat? And I was kind of struck by the idea that in some ways, using this instance in the Torah of meat and limitations on it, it's a great analogy, a great metaphor for the way that actually sometimes limiting our choices gives us more freedom. So in the case of meat, starting with that, it teaches us some important lessons. We can eat meat to our heart's desire, but we have to be humane. We can't tear off the limb of a living animal. That would be cruel. We are not supposed to cook a kid in its mother's milk because, again, you're sort of taking the life of something and cooking it in, like, you shouldn't take, it's just not it's not a good thing to take the child and cook it in its mother's milk. That seems just wrong and inhumane. So again, that humanity is an important factor when it comes to eating meat. We can't be animalistic. We have to control our desires. We can't just, now, this today wouldn't appeal to most people. It's not the cultural norm. We don't just eat raw meat. We cook our meat and our food. But think back thousands of years and you see this nice animal, perhaps you would have that animalistic impulse desire to just tear off a limb and eat it. But we have to control our desires and put those limitations on it for the greater good of our moral compass, for the greater good of the humanity, for animals, other people, whatever it happens to be. And that is really the beautiful lesson of the limitations on meat that we can apply to other areas of our lives. When we have no moral code, when we have no limitations, when we have absolute freedom and autonomy over our own decisions, with nobody to guide us or direct us, we lose sight of some of those things that are important, like that moral code, like being humane, some of those values that are really, truly important. And so sometimes that limit on our choices actually gives us a lot more freedom because it gives us a direction and sort of helps get rid of the noise and the overwhelming nature of having too many options. A different analogy. let's talk about college for an example. If your parents came to you and said, money is no object, location is no object, you have great test scores, you can go to any school you want, it could be in any country, you can study anything you want, there doesn't have to be anything specific on campus, you can live wherever you want. You might be overwhelmed by like the thousands of universities out there in the world. You might not know where to begin. But if your parents come to you and they say, okay, based off your test scores, this eliminates some of the schools. Based off of our family resources, you can afford to go someplace with this budget in mind. You need someplace that has a kosher meal plan. You need someplace that has Jewish activity on campus. You need someplace that has good athletics, whatever happens to be. They give you a few of those prerequisites saying, actually, you have to pay attention to these things first. That helps narrow the choices down for you, which can take a decision that would otherwise be overwhelming and just have this grand nature of options and opportunities, and it brings the focus down. So for some people, that might feel limiting, that might feel oppressive, but I think for the majority of people, that's actually a relief to say, okay, I still have a lot of options, a lot of good options, but these sort of priorities and these other things that are so important are going to help me bring down that decision and bring down that focus. And so it's not only with college, it's not only with the meat and milk and the limitations that the Torah provides us for that, but the Torah in general gives us a focus for life. The limitations that it puts on us and our lives, that's one way of looking at it, but another way it could either be seen as limitations or liberation, because it either is looked at encroaching on our liberty or as giving us the freedom, the liberty to make our own choices under this humane, under this moral, under this, value-filled decisions that narrows down our focus into what is maybe more important and helps us to make decisions and to guide us in our lives. So I think that's something really beautiful we can learn from Parshat Re'eh. I wish you all a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.